Hi, I'm Dr. Scott Conkright. What if your body is holding memories your mind can't access? We explore how early relationships shape your nervous system and how healing it begins through relationship, not just insight. Tune in now. Your body has something to say. The second foundational relationship is with meaning itself. That might sound abstract, but it is profoundly practical. What stories are you telling about why you're here? What makes your life worth living? These are some of the questions that this issue brings up. For some, meaning is rooted in religious or spiritual beliefs. For others, it grows out of personal values, creative expression, or the desire to contribute to something larger than the self. Whatever its form, our relationships with meaning shape whether life feels like a checklist of tasks or a narrative that invites purpose, coherence, and depth. Rachel realized her sense of stuckness wasn't just about losing touch with herself. She had been living a story of success she hadn't actively chosen. Like many, she had inherited a meaning script from her family, her culture, and her education, where hard work, achievement, and financial stability were central. For years, these external goals felt natural, but over time, they stopped resonating with her evolving sense of purpose. Through reflection and affective depth work, Rachel began to uncover what gave her life meaning, mentoring others, creating art, and deepening her relationships. She wasn't rejecting structure or ambition, she was revising the story. And meaning, like identity, isn't fixed. It must be revisited, questioned, and reauthored as we grow. There are three default scripts that shape meaning. The first is, it is what it is. This is passive acceptance without ownership. This phrase often masquerades as maturity. It sounds like equanimity, but it's often a form of quiet resignation. You take the job that deadens you, stay in the relationship that doesn't move you, enduring the grind because that's just life. When meaning collapses into mere tolerance, your sense of aliveness dims. Over time, this posture can mute core affects like interest, excitement, and enjoyment joy. The nervous system adapts to stillness, not vitality. This story might feel safe, but it isn't alive. The second one is religious or spiritual scripts. That's meaning through a higher plan. Faith can offer a sustaining story, a larger context, a sense of belonging, a framework for suffering. But even sacred narratives can become static if inherited without exploration. Belief without embodiment is scaffolding, not shelter. If spiritual meaning is used to bypass shame, fear, or anger, it can suppress rather than support the core self. True spiritual meaning emerges when you feel your way into mystery, not just memorize someone else's map. The third one is around achievement scripts. That is, meaning through status, success, or legacy. Few scripts are more seductive. They're everywhere in families, schools, media feeds. The promise is clear: produce, perform, persist, and you will earn meaning. But applause doesn't metabolize emptiness. Status doesn't fulfill longing. Legacy doesn't guarantee intimacy with your own life. These symbols can decorate your story, but they can't write it. Fulfillment begins when you align what you do with how it makes you feel, deep down, before the story even forms. The real work is around writing your own script. These default scripts aren't wrong. They offer guidance, structure, and sometimes comfort. But if they disconnect you from your core aliveness, your hunger, your hurt, your capacity for joy, they build a life that looks right but feels wrong. The invitation isn't to reject these scripts outright, it's to revise them, to re enter your story with emotional agency and authorship. That's how meaning becomes lived. That's how it becomes yours. Here are some of the unconscious dynamics of meaning making. The first is shame as gatekeeper of meaning. Before we choose meaning, we often choose safety. And shame is the inner alarm that rings when we risk social disconnection or violate a perceived norm. It acts as a psychic gatekeeper, protecting us from affective exposure. When your meaning is inherited, say a career path chosen to please a parent, it may feel inauthentic, but abandoning it threatens the shame of being ungrateful, unreliable, or just selfish. So you stay, not because the story still fits, but because walking away stirs a pre-verbal shame affect, often experienced as a subtle quicksand of dread, collapse, or heaviness. Shame doesn't just block new stories, it prevents questioning the old ones. Until shame is made visible, is felt, named, and metabolized, it will quietly shape what feels possible or reasonable when choosing your life's meaning. The second one is defensive meaning making. When life becomes overwhelming, we don't stop needing meaning. We start defending against the very affects that make meaning intimate and vulnerable. A person might adopt stoic rationalism to avoid grief. Another might cling to moral absolutism to bypass moral ambiguity or confusion. These are not often conscious choices. They arise from affective necessity. Defensive meaning making is an attempt to restore coherence by managing emotion without metabolizing it. You construct a fortress of ideals to avoid the terror of meaninglessness, loneliness, or longing. The story works, but only until it doesn't. Eventually, the defense that once offered stability begins to feel hollow, brittle, and disconnected from vitality. The third is projection and surrogate meaning. When unresolved affects are too painful or diffuse, the psyche often finds a surrogate, such as an external person, group, or ideology, to carry meaning for us. Romantic partners can become redemptive figures, movements become moral homes, careers become spiritual stand ins. At first, these externalized meanings feel transcendent, but because they carry parts of the self that are unclaimed or unprocessed, they become emotionally overcharged. When the relationship falters or the belief system cracks, the loss feels catastrophic, not just because something changed, but because a projected piece of selfhood is collapsing. Surrogate meaning creates dependency disguised as devotion. Healing begins by gently recalling those orphaned affects and integrating them into your own narrative so that the meaning becomes something you can hold, not something that holds you hostage. The fourth is affect as the soil of meaning. Meaning doesn't start in the mind, it starts in the body. Before you name a purpose, you feel it. Before you choose a path, your nervous system signals safety or threat, expansion or contraction. If you're numb, frightened, or dysregulated, your capacity to access meaningful resonance narrows. A life lived from survival states often defaults to meaning as avoidance. At least I'm doing something useful. At least I'm not failing at, and so forth. True meaning begins when the nervous system is calm enough to feel truthfully, not reactively. If you're numb, frightened, or dysregulated, your capacity to access meaningful resonance narrows. A life lived from survival states often defaults to meaning as avoidance. At least I'm doing something useful. At least I'm not failing. True meaning begins when the nervous system is calm enough to feel truthfully, not reactively. Interest, excitement, enjoyment, joy, and even distress, anguish provide the raw material from which meaning is crafted. Without affective presence, meaning becomes performative, well articulated, but uninhabited. The fifth is meaning as a predictive script. Much of what we call meaning is inherited not just from culture, but from early prediction. If I make them proud, I'll be safe. If I disappear, I won't be hurt. These are not conscious thoughts most of the time. They're affect laced forecasts encoded before language. Meaning becomes a kind of an emotional weather map, a way to predict outcomes, stay safe, and maintain coherence. When those predictions fail, when a job doesn't fulfill, a marriage doesn't heal, or a spiritual path loses intimacy, we don't just feel disappointment, we feel lost. Because we're not just losing meaning, we're watching an early safety script collapse. Recovering from this collapse means grieving the script that never quite delivered, and then slowly building a new story from what is felt rather than inherited. Here are some tools for making meaning personal. Tools for rewriting the script. These tools are to help individuals move beyond inherited or unconscious meaning structures and towards a felt, embodied sense of purpose. I offer these in workshops, in writing retreats, and in my therapy groups. I also offer them at the end of the book as part of journal material that you can practice and work with. Part 1, Awareness Practices. Identify the inherited script. The exercise is as simple as this. Write down what your parents, teachers, or culture told you makes a life meaningful. Then write down what your younger self believed would make you enough, whatever that means to you. So, which of these ideas still feel alive? Which feel imposed? The second one is what I call feel the gatekeeper question. What internal voice tells you it's wrong or selfish to rewrite your story? So, it's basically a somatic check in. Where do you feel resistance when you imagine letting go of an old script? So ask yourself this: if I stop chasing this version of success, I'm afraid that, and then ponder that. The second part is reconnecting with affective truth. This exercise is tracking your aliveness. Over 1 week, notice when you feel lightness, expansion, interest, or quiet joy. Keep a log. These are affective clues to meaning. Here's the prompt: I lost track of time when, or I felt most like myself when, anything along those lines. The fourth one is reclaim the body movement practice. Choose one activity each day, such as walking, dancing, gardening, that returns you to your body without a goal. I guess walking, dancing, gardening are goals, but goals that are more for fun than to get something done. After the activity, write this: my body remembers, or my body longs for, and see what happens. It's surprising what can come up. Part 3, revision through narrative. Name the surrogate prompt. I've been, person, career, identity, responsible for giving my life meaning because, what do you find? The follow up question would be, what would it look like to take back that responsibility? The sixth one is mourning the collapse of the script. The story I told myself used to be what? That's the question being asked. The follow up then would be, what I hoped it would give me was X, Y, or Z. And finally, ask or say or respond to, now I see that X, Y, or Z. A gentle ritual around grieving or letter writing exercise may be helpful around this exercise as well. I'm next going to talk about choosing meaning from within. Build a new meaning sentence. For instance, here's the prompt. Complete the sentence multiple times. A meaningful life for me includes, and be specific. Use sensory language. Avoid abstract terms like success or balance unless you really define them in detail. Design a micro ritual that embodies your chosen meaning. It could be lighting a candle before journaling, saying a mantra before work, or offering gratitude after a meaningful conversation. Small little things, but they make a difference. The next one is what I call the connected to others prompt, which is when I live this story, I show others that meaning becomes durable when it invites community, inspiration, or relational resonance, not as performance, but as shared humanity. So be sure to subscribe and follow along. And if you're curious where you are on your own growth journey, take the free self-discovery snapshot at scottconkright.com. You can also join our newsletter for weekly insights and learn about upcoming therapy groups, meetups, and live workshops. Until next time, be kind to the part of you that felt everything first.